Welcome back to Blender Frenzy. I am Justin, and we are continuing our series of what's new in Blender 2.8. So last time I talked about the new bugs, and there were 4 new bugs. The reason I started with the bugs again is because I wanted you to know first, so that if you're running into problems, maybe you can understand kind of what those bugs are. It wasn't meant to complain or anything. It's what I use full time for all of my editing and everything I do. Even though it's got some really big bugs that really need work, there are still some really cool things about it. In fact, this video is all about the newly added features, the deliciously newly added features in Blender 2.8's video sequence editor. So let's get started on all this goodness. The first newly added feature and the most obvious is the UI, or the user interface. And I'm not going to go over it this time. I'm actually going to make a dedicated video to show you my setup. My setup is actually slightly different than when I started when I was doing the unboxing. That is the first newly added feature. I just wanted to mention it because that is kind of like the most obvious. And it's not just the UI, it's like the whole thing. Basically, Blender has kind of been rebuilt from the ground up. So moving on to new delicious feature number 2, and that is the text font. You can actually change the text font now. So Shift A and then select a text here. And I'm going to hit the period to zoom in on that. The period on the numpad, that is. And just going to kind of zoom in here a little bit more and adjust this. And over here, you can see our features up here. I don't need this yet, so I'll just close that. Or I don't need that either. So you can see most of these features were still here. You could adjust the size of the text. And let's change the color to maybe something like a light orange. So we can see it better. And then I'm going to just type in some new text here. What's new in Blender 2.8? Question mark. Boom. And it's a little too big there, so I'm going to bring down that size right about there. Yeah, it's good for now. Now, I'm not sure if the shadow was in Blender 2.79, but if not, I think this is also a newly added feature. So you can click that shadow there, and you can see, actually, let's just zoom in here just a little bit more so we can see that a little bit better. So there we go, without the shadow and with the shadow. You can also adjust the color of the shadow, which is cool. So if I wanted to do something like that, let's see, just a little bit blue there. Turn that off for now. So everything else was here. You can change the location, you can change the wrap width. So all of that was there before, but what is new is this font option here. Ta-da! And so all you do is click open and go to your fonts folder, which is in Windows, I believe it's C drive, Windows fonts folder. But here on my Linux, it's user or USR share fonts folder. So you just have to find whatever fonts folder you have. For example, if I go into open fonts and then open dyslexic, and I am dyslexic, so well, a little bit at least. And so here you could just see a list of them. But if you come up here for the display mode, you have the short list option, you have your long list option, which is the details. So if I click that, then now I have a little bit more details, not much. But then if I click the thumbnails, you can see, oh, look at that. I can see what the text looks like. So I'm going to choose this one, double click, and boom, there you go. We have new font. Now the font in 2.79 and before was just this blocky like computer text, and it was not very pretty at all. It was just bare bones, just to get by if you needed some text. So this is so much better, and you can select any other one. So if you wanted a wacky font, or if you want like a sleek font, which if I can remember, deja vu. Okay, so here's some, like right here, if I select that, it's like we have this new sleek font here, and then you can turn on that shadow. I noticed with the thinner fonts that you can't actually adjust the shadow. Well, you can't adjust the shadow anyway, but it's a little bit further back. You can see a little further separated. So like if I do a thicker font like this, that's pretty far back too. But depending on the font, it actually If you click on this F here, you can actually go back and choose some of the fonts you had before. So I'm going to do the Open Dyslexic again. Yeah. And so depending on the font, that shadow is going to be closer or farther away. But there's no way to adjust the positioning of the shadow. It would be nice to have the position where you can like kind of maybe move it around a little bit. So maybe they'll add that in the future. Okay, moving on to new delicious feature number 3, and that is context menus. So if you right click in the sequencer, it now brings up this context menu, and depending on what you have selected, will determine what you see in the context menu. So let's take a look. We have, just our regular things that we can do: cut, copy, paste, duplicate strips. And what's nice about this is you can see all the shortcut keys here. This is really cool too. So if you wanted to come here and do add modifier, you can quickly add a curve modifier or color balance or something like that, where previously you would have to come up here to the modifiers tab, add strip modifier, and those are right there. Now you can just do a right click and boom, it brings that up for you here, which is pretty cool. And see what else. We've got copy modifiers to selection, which is nice if you need to copy the same modifier that you've used to a whole bunch of different strips. Here we can modify our effect strip. We can change the effect input or the type, reassign inputs, and all of that good stuff here. Now again, it depends on what you have selected. So let's select our video, right click, and there we go. So we have mostly the same things, but here we have movie strip. Now we can do set render size or deinterlace the movies, just that different context. Same thing with our audio strip there. So next up is new delicious feature number 4, which is the cache preview. And you can see, and we've actually went over this on the last video with the playback and everything, but you can see down here at the bottom, this like dark salmon, pinkish, orangish color, whatever you want to call it, is our cache preview. So I'm going to do a Control R to refresh the sequencer, and it'll refresh everything, and except for the frame that you're on. And as I scrub through the timeline or play, you can see that that kind of fills in. So far, that's just me kind of. So now, because I have AV sync on, audio video sync, it's gonna be skipping some frames. So those are the frames that it's dropping. But if I hit the right arrow on my keyboard, learning as I go, I was gonna put out a couple more videos with me. If you don't hear that like you're hearing it here, that's because you don't have your audio scrubbing on. And in fact, I don't want it on right now. So I'm just going to uncheck that. So now if I do the same thing, then I'm not going to hear that as I scrub. But see, now that this is cached in, that means Blender doesn't have to think so hard when you go back over it. So this is good for like effect strips like this. So let's say I had a little animation here, which actually I'm going to be doing that anyway, so might as well go ahead and do it now. So page down, I'm going to go back over to my strip and, oh, I need to select this first. And then for our size here, let's start at 30, which it was by default. So I'm going to hover my mouse over here, hit I, and then I'm going to bring my, let's just page up, and that will go to the next handle, and then we're just going to bring that up. Oh, you know what? Because the frame is for the next one, so it's right after that, I'm going to back up one frame. So back up one frame, and then we can see our text. So let's bring that up to 125, looks good, and another I for a keyframe. And then if I play, you've probably seen. So that's kind of choppy. It's choppy there. So I'm just going to do my mouse thing here, and there we go. Just me kind of learning as I go. I was gonna put out. There we go. Okay. So now all that's solid, and all I have to do is play, and then it's very smooth. So no glitches there. So that's really cool that you can visualize that now. And also make sure to, if you don't see that, go to the proxy and cache, and then check final cache or cache final. If you still don't see it, go to view, cache show cache, and final images. Also, the cache will refresh depending on your preferences. So if I go to Edit Preferences and click on System here, go to Sequencer Cache Limit, and I have it set to 2048. I could actually bump this up a little bit higher and it will cache more in, but I'm going to bring it down. So I'm just going to do 128 for now. And then I'm going to hit refresh, Control R for refresh, and that'll get rid of all that cache. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start playing. So far, that's just me kind of. And you can see as because I have the cache setting so low, it recycles itself very quickly. Meaning you only have so much cache before it'll start cutting it off. So I was going to put out a couple just like that. The more system memory you set aside for cache, the longer that's going to trail. And next, I'm proud to introduce new, delicious, very, very delicious feature number 5, and that is the blend mode is now alpha over by default. Ha! This is technically not a new added feature. It's more of a change, which I'll get to in the next video. But I was just so excited to share it, and it's definitely more of a feature in my opinion. But yes, when we added this text in, you could see it was already overlaid on top of our video without doing anything. And that was because the blend mode here, you could see, was already alpha over. So just to prove this, I'm going to add in another one, text, boom, it is alpha over. See, there's our text right there. Let's make it bigger, boom, look at that, awesome. This applies to images as well. So let's add in an image. All right, so there you go. It's already alpha over. Before, it would always be an either replace or cross, and this is what it would look like. And then you would have to come up here and be like, oh yeah, I've got to come over here and I've got to do alpha over or overdrop. Sometimes in Blender 2.79, the alpha over didn't work, so I always did overdrop. But this seems to work so far, so good. The only exception to this that I've seen is if I put these all here and I go like this. Oh, I do this and then put these in a meta strip. So if I select all of these, Control G, you can see by default the blend mode is replaced now. But that's the only situation where I have seen the blend mode replaced by default. But you can always come back and change it here. But I love the fact that if you add an image, it's alpha over by default because I add a whole bunch of PNG images that have a transparent background because I want to overlay stuff. And I'm sure a lot of people have the same opinion. So that's cool. Great job, Blender team. 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. And next, right up there with the last one, is new delicious feature number 6, and that is the strip time properties. So if you come over here to your strip tab and under time, you see you have some new looking properties here. I've gone ahead and made some cuts in my video and audio, just arbitrary cuts to show you and demonstrate this. I'm going to select this one and we're going to come over here and you can see that now Blender shows both the time and the frames in one field. So this video strip here, I know, is a duration of 20 seconds and it is 486 frames long. And that is super cool because before you'd have to calculate that. You'd either have to come down here and do some math, like putting plus and minus or divided by times in there for matching your frames per second. Or you could do something like this. If I come up here to do Control T, that toggles between frames and time. I'd have to come over here and be like, okay, well, let's see, page down. So that's at 47 seconds. And then if I do page up, that's at 1 minute and 8 seconds. And so then I have to say, okay, well, that minus 40 seconds, and that's the time. That you know, your 20 seconds there. So that is really tedious. Now, don't have to do that. It's all right here. But that is not the coolest thing about this. The coolest thing about this is the fact that you can see both globally in the sequencer and locally relative to your selection. And I'll show you this. This is cool. So with this selected still, I'm just gonna just move this arbitrarily in here. And let's do this one here. So Control T back here to, we have frame 1361. But relative to this selection, you can see over here the playhead says it's 8 seconds in, or 212 frames in. And that's 212 frames from the start of this frame. To prove this, I can just come over here. This is where my playhead is. If I'm scrubbing, I can do that. Click here, minus 212, enter, boom. It goes right back to the beginning of that strip, which now you can see, since I have the strip selected, I'm at 0 for the time and 0 for the frames. That is super cool. So I can see both globally and locally at the same time really quickly. One more thing along with that is that I can now gauge the time for multiple strips. And this is cool. You don't even have to make a meta strip for this. So if I go to the end here, well, let's do 1 frame in so we can see our footage here. And if I select this one, now I can see, okay, this strip is 12 seconds long and 295 frames, just like before. Now I'm at 1 minute and 20 seconds globally from the start of my frame range. But now if I select a different strip, you can see now it's at 32 seconds. And if I select this strip, now it's at 39 seconds. Well, what it's showing is relative to whichever one you have selected. So this is 39 seconds away from the beginning of this strip and 948 frames away. So again, if I come down here and I do minus 948, it's going to go to the beginning of this strip, which means that gives you so much more control over calculating how much time multiple strips are together. So this will greatly help you speed up fine-tuning your timing on different things, and that is so delicious. Okay, moving on to new delicious feature number 7, and that is audio waveform volume visualization. And what I mean by that is, let's zoom in here. You can see our waveform visualization for our audio. And so basically, I'm going to show you what I mean here. So here's that's the volume. And if I select the volume here and go to adjust my sound, here's my volume. Now, previously in Blender 2.79, you could adjust the volume just like this. But what didn't happen was this. If I put 0.3 instead of 1, that means it's going to bring the volume down, and you can see that visually here. It actually changes the waveform and brings that waveform down to match the volume amount, which didn't happen before. Basically, you could change the volume, and it did soften the volume audibly, but visually the waveform stayed the same. So this is a really cool new feature. So you can see that, okay, just from a glance, I know that this audio is softer than the surrounding audio. Another cool thing about this is if I go too loud, let's just go to 3. So it's basically full volume is 1. And if I type 3, so that's going to be 3 times as loud. You can now see these red vertical lines going straight through your strip. And basically what that is that is showing you what is clipping. So you can see clipping basically is where the waveform or it's too loud for the microphone or the speakers or whatever. It cuts off some of the range of your audio. And so that's what's happening here. You can see. So if I start to bring this down, you can see they start to disappear. But if they go past that, then it clips, and then you see that line. You can see it from a bird's eye view here. So I would be able to know that there's clipping in any of these just by looking at it from this far away. Super useful. Awesome job. Again, great deliciousness from the developer team. And again, 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. Yay! Okay, new delicious feature number 8, and that is keyframes that you can edit on the regular timeline. So before, Blender only did a representation on this timeline, just a regular timeline, you could see where the keyframes were. They just had like these little lines, but you couldn't edit them. So you'd have to actually go to the dope sheet, which is another editor. You'd have to click this and go dope sheet, or you'd have to pull out another window and go to the dope sheet to move these. But now you can see these diamond shapes right in the timeline. And you got to be careful actually. So if you don't see them, it's probably because uh, you need to right or middle click and pull that down. That's kind of weird, but at least you can edit them. So if I wanted to make this this animation go just a little bit faster, I just take this end one and pull it in here. So now if I come back here, you can see whoop, it goes really fast, or even faster, and whoop. Now you're also able to do the same thing like you were able to do before in the dope sheet. And if you take both of these and shift D to duplicate them, you can see basically it just acts like the old dope sheet. And now if I kind of go here and then I do just have these two selected, if I do a scale, hit S, -1, enter. And then that flips them around on the timeline cursor there. And now you have it growing up here like this, growing up. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. And then at the end, it shrinks again. So there you go. So just like the regular dope sheet. And speaking of dope sheet, the last one we're going to look at is new delicious feature number 9, and that is the new dope sheet visualization. Now the dope sheet is still the dope sheet. I don't even know why it's called the dope sheet. It sounds very weird. But if I zoom in here, let's just do home. There we go. You can see that it looks different. And basically they've added new visualization so that you don't have to necessarily switch back and forth between the graph editor, which is what you kind of had to do before. Now I'll show you if the best I can here. You can see that starting here and then going from here to here, that's when our text, where's our text? Here we go. That's when our text grows. So we have it growing from here to here, and that's what you can see. This is the graph editor, and that's what this slope is that growing. Now, if I look at my dope sheet, the first thing you're going to notice that's new is these green lines that go all the way across. And basically, that is meaning that these are linear. This is a linear or a constant, maybe, something like that. But if I take both of these keyframes and I hit T to bring up our interpolation, and I select Bezier curve here, now you can see those green lines go away. Not for these down here because I didn't change those. I only had the first two keyframes in our thing selected. There's the whole thing. It starts out slow here down at the bottom, and then it speeds up a little bit, and then it tapers off slowly. But now you don't necessarily need the graph editor to understand that from here to here, it's not linear. And it's probably a Bezier curve. The other thing is the handle type. So if I hit V on my keyboard, and you can also come up here to key, interpolation mode, which is the shortcut T, handle type, which is the shortcut V. So I'm going to hit V again, and all of these existed before in 2.79, but what didn't exist were the icons that you can see here. So the diamond icon is your free form, and that's a diamond shape, and you can see that this is a diamond shape. But now let's change it. Let's say I hit V and I go to aligned. It's a diamond with like cut off ends, and it's hard to see probably from this distance, but if you kind of look in and kind of see. Oh, I see. It's more like a pointy oval shape, like this, like a mouth almost. So vector, that's your square again, and all of this is for here's automatic, and that again is supposed to be. Oh, I need to select that one, not the handle. Automatic. There we go. And then auto clamped. But basically, again, this is supposed to be so you don't need this. You can just use this. So if I do V here, I can change this back to automatic or vector more aligned, and you can see that that's changing shape. And that's really cool because then again, it helps you not switch back and forth between different areas. It maybe helps you keep a more clean workspace, and that's pretty cool. Some of the other visualizations you can see here are like this dark background. You can see basically that means this keyframe and this keyframe are the exact same. So there will be no changes between these two. Um, and that if none of them are selected, it shows in like this darker shadow thing. And that's the same thing it would show down here in your timeline. But I think that is it. So those are 9 new delicious features in Blender 2.8. I hope that's a little bit more positive message. There are more new added features that are really good than there are bugs that I've noticed. So I hope that helps you, at least give you a little bit more motivation to continue using Blender 2.8 as a video editor. And that is it for me in this video. Stay tuned for the next video where we talk about some of the smaller changes. So until then, happy editing.